this guy always delivers, always brings whatever we need when he comes through for the show. And I'm so excited to have him back. He and I, of course, get to talk all the time, being NFC South Locked On NFL host mates over here over at Locked On, the Locked On Podcast Network. We're going to bring in our guy for the Locked On Falcons podcast, Aaron Freeman, who you can follow on Twitter at Falc Fans. And of course, you can catch the podcast every Monday through Friday, wherever it is that you're getting these podcasts these days. Probably not Apple, but that's all right. Apple's having its troubles. But wherever it is that you get your podcast, you can find Aaron every Monday through Friday with Locked On Falcons. Aaron, thank you so much for coming through, man. Good to see you.
I appreciate you guys having me, man. It's been a while since we've done one of these Sunday chats.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
It's been a minute, Aaron, but I tell you what, I scroll my Twitter feed and I see some of the things you got going on, and you were kind of not too happy about the selection of Kyle Pitts, even though you're excited about the pick as the player, but in terms of maybe some other future needs, you weren't too pleased with the outcome of the pick. Kind of explain that a little bit. Pitts, phenomenal talent out of Florida, but there was another player you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, you guys just had the conversation with Lauren Cox of Locked On Justin Fields, and I thought the pick was going to be Justin Fields. I thought the Falcons, given their relatively quiet offseason, if people were following me on Twitter in March, they know I was quietly, or maybe not so quietly, raging about the Falcons' lack of activity of filling some of their needs that they needed to address. And it felt like their sort of low-key approach to the offseason and being cheap was more geared towards building long-term towards the future and sort of setting this team up in a position where they would be a competitive team for the next, 10, 15 years. And obviously when you can sort of secure the quarterback position like they could have had with Justin Fields' selection, it seemed like all signs were pointing in that direction. And then the Falcons went and drafted Kyle Pitts, which, as you say, Cody, great player, not at all upset about the pick, but just sort of had been building up towards the team going in one direction. And as usual with the Falcons, they always zig when you expect them to zag. So I'm used to it. I should have expected it to come, but I just, as usual, I get sucked in to the allure of sort of the Falcons doing one thing and they always do the opposite thing. So.
Hey, man, look, as the guy over here covering the New Orleans Saints, nobody knows zigging when teams should zag or expected to zag more than us here in the NFC South, I imagine. You have to imagine, though, as you mentioned, you're not upset about the pick, right? You didn't like Kyle Pitts over Justin Fields because Justin Fields gives you essentially helps you guarantee years of success forward. But what does Kyle Pitts bring to this team, and how do defenses deal with this offense next season for the Atlanta Falcons?
Well, I appreciate you setting this up, Ross, because I'm going to be talking extensively about Kyle Pitts on Monday's show, Locked On Falcons, giving my own scouting report, and certainly next couple of days be having a lot of guests talking about Kyle Pitts. So, of course, everybody tune into Locked On Falcons if you want to hear more insight into Kyle Pitts. But, yeah, I think Kyle Pitts is a superb player. He's the sort of building block piece that you can build your entire offense around, similar to what we have seen teams in recent years be successful at doing with players like Travis Kelce and Darren Waller. And really the sky is the limit with Kyle Pitts' potential in this league. He has the potential, given that he is as young as he is. He's going to be 21, I think, in this fall. But he has the potential, if all things go according to plan, and, the NFL is unpredictable in that regard. But, he could be one of the greatest tight ends of all time if he really hits his stride and becomes the player that I think a lot of people think he has the capability of being, including myself, and be this sort of Travis Kelce type of player, this Darren Waller type of player. And we saw Darren Waller take the better part of 4 or 5 years before he became the player that we know him as. Travis Kelce was a little bit older when he got into the league and really didn't hit his stride until he was age 24. Kyle Pitts is going to be 21. And if the Falcons can get Kyle Pitts to play at that level at 22, 23, the sky's the limit for the type of production that we could see him have in Atlanta. And I think he's the type of player that really can be that building block piece, that centerpiece of your offense, similar to what we've seen over the last decade with Julio Jones being that player for the Falcons. And obviously Julio Jones is getting up in age. There's a lot of talk about whether or not the Falcons may be moving on from Julio Jones this summer. But it is one of those things where I think Kyle Pitts, maybe not immediately, but certainly in a year or two, could sort of slot in and be that guy that is the guy that everybody talks about when they are game planning against the Falcons and saying we have to stop that guy, similar to what we've spent the last 8-9 years saying that about Julio Jones.
Absolutely.
Well, the thing I'm intrigued about too is we can envision probably in the next couple of years, Aaron, is that there's going to be a lot of changes with the Falcons. Now, obviously, a new head coach, new GM, but the thing that I'm trying to pinpoint here, a lot of people are saying, and I firmly believe Matt Ryan still has probably could still play really elite football for another 3 years. But is that what is best for the Atlanta Falcons? Should they be looking to the future? I mean, what are your thoughts on it? Because I thought he played really well last year, and despite some of the issues there, I understand that they need to add a playmaker. You have Calvin Ridley, Julio, and now you add in Kyle Pitts. That's strong. And if Matt Ryan can play the way that he has played, I think they still have a really good window in the next 3 years. But you do factor in, as Matt Ryan gets older, there is a need at some point to replace him. The Packers, they did that too early. They tried to accelerate that plan for the succession plan for Rodgers, and now look how that's going. Do you feel like that was maybe an issue in the Falcons' thinking here?
Yeah, I think, Cody, you bring up a great point, because you sort of look at the drama surrounding Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and you wonder, had the Falcons taken a player like Justin Fields at that number 4 overall selection, would they be inviting similar sort of drama here to Atlanta? And this organization has been relatively low key in terms of having these big sort of world-changing headlines and tracking some of this, whether you call it, good publicity or bad publicity type of stuff that you're seeing with other organizations. I think the concern is, and I think, Cody, you're right, Matt Ryan's, immediate future, the next 2 to 3 years, I don't think anybody is that concerned about it. But as he gets closer to 40 years old, he's going to be 36 later this month. You do wonder, sort of, given what we've seen with a lot of other quarterbacks, and we've seen with, a quarterback that Ross is very familiar with, Drew Brees, look like they start to slow down at a certain point, and you can't necessarily rely as much on them sort of spearheading the offense, and it becomes more about the pieces around them, the running game, the weapons, the defense. And it seems like the quarterback goes back to what they were early in their careers, which is being asked to manage the game than necessarily be the guy. And I think when you look around the league and you see all these teams, and you guys know this, given the quarterback issues that your teams have been dealing with this offseason in recent years, and you talk about it with Lauren, you talk about it with Patricia, with the Giants a couple of years ago with Eli Manning, you look at the Green Bay situation. It seems like every team is scrambling, trying to find that security blanket and that sort of anchor point at the quarterback position. I think the Falcons were in a relatively unique situation, given they had a new head coaching staff that you would presumably assume would be around for some time, so you wouldn't be worried about, like you were in previous years, worried about, we're drafting quarterback because he has to go out there and save someone's job, similar to what you're seeing with the Bears. And the Falcons had a unique situation where I think they could have secured a position that a lot of teams are really struggling to find some stability at, and are scrambling year to year, going this way, going that way, zigging when you're expecting them to zag, trying to find that stability. And I think the Falcons could have done themselves a great service by securing that spot and not having those question marks, and having that sort of heir apparent in that sort of transition point, whether it would be a year or so down the road, sort of secured.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, going from locked on Justin Fields to locked on Kyle Pitts, not too terrible. And I'm looking forward to hearing all of the breakdowns around Kyle Pitts as Locked on Falcons gets rolling again, starting with the Monday episode. Of course, you can catch Aaron you can catch Aaron over at Locked on Falcons every Monday through Friday, and every now and then here live on the Locked on NFL Sunday show, because certainly we'll be bringing it back. You can follow on Twitter at FalcFans. Aaron, we appreciate you coming through, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. I look forward to doing it 3 months from now.
Absolutely. See you soon, brother.
Ross, Aaron touched on a really important point about quarterbacks and succession plans. And if anybody knows about how hard that is, the Denver Broncos and now the New Orleans Saints are just now entering that window. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know if they have the guy on their roster, but we see a lot of teams now. And I think the common narrative we see in national media, you need a franchise star quarterback. But I also I think that gets into a little bit of murky waters there. It gets into a little bit of a level of dangerous thinking, because you can have a star quarterback. Look at the Houston Texans. They had Deshaun Watson, who put up phenomenal numbers last year. But what did they have around him? Right. Nothing. No defense. The offense was subpar. You had a couple of receiving talents. You trade away his best option. I really believe that there's a fine line. You can have a good quarterback in the NFL, in the modern state of what it is, but you have to have a really good team around him. You have to have a good offensive line to protect him. You have to have good backs to help solidify a run game to take pressure off quarterbacks. You have to have receivers around for that quarterback when they do air it out to be able to come up and be reliable. And you need a defense that can stop the opposing offense. I think that we get so caught up now in the national media narrative that it's franchise quarterback or bust that a lot of teams lose out on the bigger picture, and you have to have the pieces around him. And when I look at a team like the Saints, defensively, they have loaded up, right? And that's something that's going to help. They still have offensive talent. You have Alvin Kamara, you have Michael Thomas. Right. You have talent around you to be able to sustain maybe the blow of losing a guy like Drew Brees. So to me, I think that is a super important element that not many people talk about. But luckily, we talk about it here on Locked On NFL Sunday, baby.
This is what we do. This is why it's different over here. You know, we're built different when it comes to the way we look at the way that these teams are built. And I think you're absolutely right. And I'll give you another example too. Look at the Cincinnati Bengals, right? They get their franchise quarterback in a guy like Joe Burrow, but if you can't keep him safe, you can't keep him healthy, and you're not prepared in the trenches above anything else, then you're not going to find success, right? I mean, are you more likely to win a game with a, you know, let's say a top 5 offensive line than you are to win with a top 5 quarterback? I think you can go back and forward on that. You know, if you have a top 15 quarterback and a top 5 offensive line, I would wager say you win more games than if you had a bottom 15 offensive line and a top 5 quarterback, depending upon what that quarterback's unique skill set may bring to the game. So I'm all about building in the trenches and making sure that teams are going to be able to do that. It's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit concerned about the Chicago Bears. They invest in the quarterback and then immediately hedge their, you know, handicap themselves by getting rid of this offensive line or you know, not having a very well-structured offensive line and moving a rookie right tackle who's been a career right tackle over to left tackle. Just a lot of risk involved in all of that. And so there's some concern there for me for certain. But, you know, look, if the focus is going to be on grabbing the franchise quarterback, that's okay. But as you mentioned, and sort of as the analogy that Aaron was going for, as we looked at what the Denver Broncos did late in Peyton Manning's career, what the New Orleans Saints did late in Drew Brees' career, it became about the vehicle that drove the quarterback as opposed to the quarterback that was driving the vehicle.